Okay, good morning everyone and welcome to today's Research Advantage Grant Accelerator Program session on engagement and impact. For those who don't know me already, my name is Casey Wilson and I work on the Research Advantage Program in the Office of the Pro-Vice Chancellor Research and Innovation at the University. We have a fantastic lineup today and we will be hearing from Kanina Mackay in the Research and Innovation Division, the Strategic Implementation Coordinator. And also we have Matthew Mclaughlin, some of you might know him as Tepi, and also Benjamin Elton from the Hunter New England Population Health. As I begin, I would like to acknowledge that I am hosting this session from the lands of the Awabakal people. I also acknowledge the traditional custodians of the various lands in which all of you join this session today, and the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who might be participating in this session. I pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and celebrate the diversity of Aboriginal peoples and their ongoing cultures and connections to the lands and waters of Australia. I'm shortly going to hand over to Kanina. Just firstly want to do some housekeeping and just say that for everyone, thank you for joining us today. For your questions throughout the session, you're welcome to post them in the Zoom chat. We also have an active fun retro board for posting your questions for presenters or thoughts and ideas. That link has been posted in the chat. I can post again throughout the session just to remind you. And we ask everyone to keep your, if you're not speaking, to keep your microphone and your video off. This session is being recorded as well. So without further ado, I'll now introduce and hand over to Ms. Kanina Mackay, our Strategic Implementation Coordinator. Kanina will be our facilitator host today and also presenting. Thank you, Kanina.
Thank you very much, Casey, and thanks again to Research Advantage for preparing everything for today's session. So as always, you guys are amazing and we couldn't do this without you. Before we start, I would also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands in which we meet this morning and pay my respects to their leaders past, present and emerging. And a hearty welcome to all of our attendees this morning. For those of you who have not had the pleasure of listening to my dulcet tones over the past few years, my name is Kanina Mackay and I am the Engagement and Impact Lead in the Research and Innovation Division at the University of Newcastle. Now, while this job has not been which has been an incredibly hard sell in the past and continues to be a real challenge, I'm really buoyed by the level of traction that this space is getting at the moment. And as someone who is essentially pretty miserable, it's what I really like about this is that the more that you plan, track and promote the amazing research that you guys do, the chances are that you're going to achieve greater impact in the real world, which is what we're all sort of after at the end of the day. I'm very pleased to tell you all that the Engagement and Impact Toolkit, which I'll show you a little bit later after our guest speakers have spoken, has seen close to 600 visitors from our research community who have accessed more than 8,000 resources in just 12 months. So I'm really delighted with that. I'm actually thinking of selling advertising space at this point to support my own role going forward. No, I'm not actually going to do that, but I would really encourage you to bookmark the EI toolkit on SharePoint and refer to it with those resources. And of course, after we speak to our guest speakers today, they've kindly offered to share their resource on the EI toolkit, which is fantastic. The other very cool aspect to my job is when a researcher reaches out to tell me about something that they're up to and would I like to see it, and what they're doing to sort of drive end user engagement, knowledge translation and articulate their impact. And I've got to tell you, these guys had me at hello. They're very difficult to get rid of once they've got their claws into you. I'm delighted to introduce Matthew, Tepi, Mclaughlin and Ben Elton from Hunter New England Population Health, who in their spare time between COVID surge tracing have developed a publication impact roadmap. And like I said before, we're very happy that they're prepared to share it with us. So without further ado, I shall stop talking now and hand over to the capable hands of Tepi and Ben. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kanina. Yeah, we've got our claws well and truly into this one. I'll just share my screen so everybody can see that. So I'm going to kick us off. All right, so I'd also like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land that we're meeting on today and paying our respects to elders past, present and emerging. So we're going to dive straight in, really. We're going to talk about how we can take a journal article on a journey to greater impact through increased engagement. So I'm not going to labour the point around knowledge translation, but essentially we're talking about knowledge translation, an aspect of knowledge translation, and that's getting the right research to the right people in the right format at the right time. So there's some related areas that we're talking about: knowledge translation, reach, impact, engagement. This work has come about in our research group through a program of work that we've called the Knowledge Translation Champions. So myself, Ben, and a few others at Hunter New England Population Health, affiliated with the University of Newcastle, have been working on ways to increase our engagement with journal articles. Increasing engagement with journal articles, and I promise this is the final background slide, is only one part of knowledge translation. So this is a figure from Cochrane, and they talk about all of these different methods to increase knowledge translation. We're mainly focusing on packaging and push and facilitating pull. Although when we go through this presentation, you'll see that there are some elements of co-production and exchange and improving climate and building demand. So who here today, and perhaps this can go in the Zoom chat, who here today has ever written a plain language version of their journal article, or perhaps emailed their paper to someone who's requested it? These are just a couple of examples of the kind of things that we're talking about today. And we're going to be very practical. So I'm just going to try and see if I can bring the chat up. Or perhaps I can't see it, but perhaps if you can just pop it in the chat, Ben will have a quick look, see what kind of activities people have been doing. But yeah, like I say, these are a couple of examples of the type of things that we're talking about. We're keeping it very practical today. So we're not going to go into too much theory and stuff like that. This is our publication that Kanina was talking about. So a roadmap for your journal article. So the roadmap, it's to generate ideas. It's not necessarily an exhaustive list of the things that you can do with your journal article. And each of the turnoffs on this road, so the little blue circles, is an opportunity. And it comes in some kind of chronological order. You've got pre-submission right through to post-publication. We're welcoming feedback on this, so it's by no means a finished product, and there's always additions, things we could change, so please do get in touch. We'll put our details up at the end of this presentation. It's a long journey, but everybody's got journal articles at different stages on the go. So if you've got a journal article that's already been accepted, then pick up the roadmap from that point. But if you know you're about to embark on writing one, then perhaps start back at the beginning. We'll make this PDF available through Kanina as well. So don't worry about getting a copy of that. That'll be up on the toolkit soon. So let's just have a quick zoom in. So we've got pre-submission, pre-acceptance, then pre-publication and post-publication. And there's all of these different turnoffs. So between myself and Ben, we're going to go through each of those turnoffs and give some really practical examples of how we've been doing it and how others have been doing it and what we've learned from other people as well. And we are, as I say, we really would like to hear how other people have been doing it, because we don't proclaim to be experts in doing this. We've just been working on it for for a while now. In companion with the other roadmap, the back page of our roadmap has a little bit more information. So when this presentation's over and in a couple of months' time, when you pick it back up again and you're wondering what did it mean by add a publication to Kudos project page, you'll be able to go back in there, or design an infographic. You'll be able to go and find a little bit more detail about how to do that. So our document is a 2-pager. There's the roadmap and then there's the detailed roadmap to go with this presentation. All right, so I'm going to hand over to Ben for the first part of our journey, starting at pre-submission. So
Yep.
I'll stop my share.
We've got a few coming through on the chat. I just had it up then, sorry, it's just disappeared. Saying that they have emailed through. There's a few different, one person has brought up that the article wasn't allowed to, but the guidelines wasn't allowed to email out. So we'll discuss a bit more about that, or Tepi might have some ideas.
Sure,
about
definitely.
how to overcome those hurdles. A lot have been emailing and sending through ResearchGate, which is often a good tool. Quite a few messages come through there requesting access to articles, but again, you need to adhere to the submission guidelines. But we'll touch a bit on that later on. I'll just get up share my screen here. Bear with me.
I'll monitor the chat, Ben. If people are firing through questions, I might be able to fire them to you during the presentation as well. So feel free to fire away questions as Ben's talking.
All right, so I'm going to discuss a bit about, jump straight in and talk about the pre-submission and pre-acceptance stages of the roadmap. And as Tepi was saying before, there's a lot of avenues to come off. There's a lot of steps that we can be doing. We are by no means experts at this, so please jump in the chat. Tepi will be monitoring about suggestions or ideas or questions, or we'll get to them in the end. But this is just some of the ideas that we have implemented here at Hunter New England Population Health in some of our trials, and we'll go through a little bit in more detail. So in the pre-submission phase, so this is before you submitted your manuscript, there's things you can be doing that can really enhance your research engagement and your impact. The first thing is, generally the first step is getting buy-in from co-authors. And it's basically a first step in promoting research engagement. It should be included right at the beginning of the pre-submission phase of when you're thinking about, haven't even thought about submitting your manuscript yet for a research article. It's about getting co-authors and people on board early to engage in the future roadmap activities that we're going to discuss today. It's about acknowledging those who are interested, getting early support, and work out, who's keen to get involved, who's going to be invested in promoting this research, who will support and share once the research has been completed, and also about who won't. There's both going to be resistance and supporters, even from your co-authors. There's ones that are going to be interested in the research itself and going through the research steps. But when it comes to sharing and promoting, they might not be as active or engaged. Whereas you might have the inverse, where there's people that are helping with the research, but really, really step up in the promotion and research engagement. So a more practical solution of generating this buy-in from your co-authors is to develop a sort of dissemination plan that features more than just simply journal submissions. So not just picking where you're going to submit your article, but also include, okay, who's going to do a plain language summary, or who's going to develop an infographic, and where are we going to send it to, which key stakeholders are we going to engage in. And we're going to discuss these a bit more in detail as Tepi and I go through the presentation. But it's really about coming up with a plan early on that has all these little things, maybe even Twitter sharing, things like that, that you might not think about in this stage early on when you're still writing up your research or conducting your research, but they're really crucial to increase your research impact and engagement. Another easy step to do in this pre-submission phase is, and a lot of researchers already do this one, but I always like to highlight it, is creating an ORCID profile and getting your ORCID ID or your ORC ID. I don't know how to pronounce it, I just use it. And basically, this is very helpful and can save a lot of time in the future especially as your projects progress, or if you're going across different projects, to keep track of all your journal articles, the stages that they're in, and also helps other people link to all the work that you've been doing. So for those who aren't aware of what ORCID is, it takes about 5 minutes to create your profile, and it's essentially a unique ID that you have. It's your ORCID ID, and you log this with all your research. So you have this little code that you put on all your manuscripts everywhere. You can put on your PowerPoint presentations, your poster presentations, and basically people can look at that, and it's your researcher ID, and it links to all the research you've done across projects. It takes about 5 minutes to set it up, and then you just have that code and you can list it anywhere on manuscripts. A good practical solution when you're generating buy-in from co-authors is to insist that these IDs are added to all your manuscripts, maybe even adding them into places where you put like a Twitter handle on posters and things like that. So then people can really go, oh, okay, here's this researcher, he or she is involved in all these different steps across all these different disciplines or projects. They can track that, and then you'll get more engagement from other researchers or audiences that are seeing your work. The main benefit is just saving time in the future of keeping track of all the articles that you've done, which will help map your engagement. So if you're using the engagement tool that is in the that Kanea's been sharing, you can easily see where all the work you've been doing and keep track of everything. So it saves a lot of time in the end for 5 minutes at the start. Now, sharing results with stakeholders. So this is a big one that I think is often forgotten or overlooked. It's often left until post-publication. It's not really thought about in the pre-submission phase. It's something that I find adds a lot of real value to the research and ensures engagement with the key populations that you are working with. So in this context, stakeholders covers a range of people. So it's both your research population or participants that you're working with, as well as groups that are invested in your research. So for example, an advisory group or research body that is interested and invested in your research, they are a part of your stakeholders, as well as the research population that you are working with. So for a bit of example, so I've been working over the last few years on a large scale primary school physical activity program. So for me, the key stakeholders were the principals, the teachers, the school champions we had within the schools that were working with our program that might not generally access or read our journal articles once we've submitted. So it was about we come up with an idea of providing feedback and of our research results and the details of the program to those key stakeholders. So if you look on the slides, you'll see there's 3 kind of infographics that we created. And as I was working in primary schools, we kind of had the idea to keep them as report cards. So essentially within the school, something you might see as a student, teachers might be handing out. And it was a way to say, hey, look at all the physical activity, the great work that you've been doing, the improvements that you've had, and showing these results after the research has been finished, but prior to submitting and publicizing the work. So it was about highlighting, the importance of the research for the people that have been involved from the get-go that were helping us create this research, and saying, look at the great work you've done. Here's how much it's improved or not improved, target areas that we can work on in the future. It's about engaging with them. So then potentially you can create further links to continue research down the track. And that's something we have been doing for my work in the primary schools. So yeah, Hunter-New Population Health across multiple trials have been using these kind of infographic report cards and feedback sheets. And we've been sharing these results with stakeholders well before we're even publishing the work. It was just a great way to highlight the research that we were doing and the involvement of these key stakeholders.
Quick question on that one, Ben, from the chat. Yeah. So what programs would you recommend? And that's probably the main one. What program?
So for developing these report cards, we used an online tool called Canva. So it's basically, you can use any developing or design software available. You can even use PowerPoint if that's readily accessible to you. We used Canva. There is a free and a premium version online, and it's an online tool that you could basically create these kind of feedback infographics or report cards or things that you want to use. I mean, you tailor it specifically to the research population or the stakeholders you're working with. One of my biggest tips would be, I guess, keeping a key color theme throughout the project. So that way stakeholders can see, and can map, I guess, the feedback or the results you're showing and make it sure that they know it's that research project. So if you look in the middle one, the green and purple report card, those are the colours for Good for Kids, Good for Life, which is a program that's been running for many years. And so we kept that same colour theme. So then across projects, across years, schools, childcare centres, high schools can all look at this and go, oh yeah, that's that colour that's linked to Hudson England population health. So yeah, that's a big tip I would say, is to keep a consistent colour theme, keep it minimalistic colour theme, so there's not too many. If you look at the purple one, that's a nice example, 3 colours on that, so it's not too confronting. Yeah,
Fun.
And it's really good to highlight the research that you've been doing with these key groups. Another tool that we can be using in the step that we can be doing in the pre-submission phase is considering preprint. So I know this has already come through in the chat about submission guidelines and adhering to submission guidelines for specific journals. So this one, there has a bit of a caveat on it that you need to kind of understand that you can't do this all the time, but Tepi will discuss a bit more about a tool that we can use in Sherpa Romeo, which you may or may not have heard of, but Tepi will discuss that a bit later on, which will help. But preprint is basically the process of uploading your manuscript prior to it being peer reviewed, uploading basically a draft version of it so that you can get it out there quickly. It's mainly used, and it's a good reason to consider it, would be for, I guess, more timely research. A good example is a lot of our research and articles that have been on the COVID-19 research have been doing a lot of preprint. So very timely, they need to get they want to get the results out there, the research out there. They don't have to wait for peer review or all through those hurdles. So they upload or preprint a draft, have it out there. It gets a lot of impact. It gets a lot of engagement and interest straight away. And then that kind of helps you when you're submitting and when you're going through the peer review process. So it's a good step to consider, but you have to be mindful that some journals won't match their submission guidelines. So you might have to tweak what draft you upload. Maybe it's not the full draft you're submitting. But then again, there are some journals like the Journal of Medical Internet Research. This one includes this as a service as part of the submission. So they'll actually promote preprint while it's being peer reviewed. So it is a good thing to consider, especially for very timely research that you want to get it out there and generate that impact straight away. So then we're moving on to the pre-acceptance phase. And I'm just going to jump straight in here because there are some very practical things that we can do along the way. So firstly, the main one that I like to promote here is drafting a plain language summary. So plain language summaries are an excellent way to increase the reach of your research. And I am paraphrasing our friend Albert here, but if you understand your research, you should be able to explain it simply enough for other audiences to understand too. So plain language summaries provide an opportunity to tailor relevant messages to specific audiences. So basically they should be used in simple, plain language so that everyone can understand it, and you can attract and you can engage audiences that you might not be able to engage with, say, a published journal article that has a lot of scientific terminology. This step ties quite nicely with providing feedback to key stakeholders. So if you don't want to go down the infographic front, if you write a plain language summary, like a very short summary that's in plain language, you can provide it to all the stakeholders and they can understand, and then perhaps get a bit of interest and say, well, this is very interesting, I want to read this, I'll go on further and look at the published journal. And that's something you can send later on. So you create a plain language summary to get a bit of interest early on before your manuscript is accepted. And you can use this on a variety of different formats. We've used a platform, growkudos.com. I recommend going and have a look at all the work that they're doing there. But you can do this step on just Microsoft Word, on a notebook, on pen and paper if you want. You can do this anywhere. And it's essentially just writing a very brief summary in plain language that answers 2 main questions. What is it about, and why is it important? What is your research about? What's the focus, and why is it important? Why should people be reading this summary? And then why should they go on to read your journal article once it's published? Again, it's just...
Sorry, Ben, another quick one there from the chat from earlier was, what tools were we using And so we've mentioned Grow Kudos, but there's also the ability to upload it to, say, your Word document version. You can upload that for free to ResearchGate and create a unique DOI for that particular publication. That's another option of doing it. There's a few options.
Yeah, no, exactly right. Yeah, apologies for missing those ones, but yeah, so there's a lot of ways you can get this plain language summary out there. You can even put it at the front of your manuscript when it does get accepted. So another version of an abstract, really. A lot of abstracts for journal articles will be very specific, whereas you can have a plain language summary prior to that. So again, just getting more interest off the bat. But yeah, chucking it on ResearchGate, giving it a DOI, getting it online somewhere, anywhere really, putting it on a website or your website if your organization has one, just basically getting it out there as much as possible. If they're short and they're written in plain language, people will read them, won't take them too long, and they'll get interest in your research. Okay, so the next few slides are about infographics. So I guess what are infographics? So it's all in the name, essentially. It's graphic or graphical images that convey information about your research. They should be used in combination with your plain language summaries, your feedback. They should be used in PowerPoint slides, online, on Twitter, everywhere. They could be physical on posters. They could be essentially graphs or images that help display and accompany your text to provide information. So I'm going to go through a few examples from Mike Morrison's open science framework. He's got a lot of, if you Google that, he's got a lot of good ideas, practical ideas of things that you can use when you're designing posters, presentations, Twitter posts. Yeah, so I'll be showing you a few slides that we've just taken from there. So acknowledging that, but it's very useful to incorporate infographics within your work to help grab interest and attention of your audience. From the very get-go, showcase your main takeaway points from the beginning. Don't wait too long into your PowerPoint presentation or too long down into your Twitter post or anything. Whenever you're emailing anything off, just straight away from the very start, have the main takeaway from the first slide. Everyone loves figures. I love graphs. Put them in your PowerPoint presentation, show the main findings. But a cool thing is have the same figure across multiple graphs to kind of break up that text. So it's not just all text and you're not sitting on one slide explaining it for so long. Break it up a little bit. You can split figures, the same figure across slides while you're talking to them. I mean, who cares? Who cares what I'm talking about? There's a few people here listening to me. Really hit home with your findings and the importance of your research, important about what you're talking about. Remember the plain language summaries, talk about what are you talking about and why is it important? Why should people be listening? So it doesn't matter what your research topic is, infographics are a great way to reduce the text and engage audiences. So you can start it up, set it up on one slide, and then go to the next one as you're talking, as you're progressing through. So use images and stages to explain your research in stages. Use them to assist your explanation, reduce that text down. Even within PowerPoint, you can quickly add animated GIFs or infographics that way. So again, we'll be sharing these slides so you can have a look, it will be recorded. But if you go File, Export, Create Animated GIF, put it in there, it'll just spice up, I guess, your PowerPoint a little bit more. An idea from Mike Morrison, as you'll be seeing here, is to add some little timer graphics to your slides. It helps relieve the from a static slide. It also is a bit of a guide to both you and the audience that you're not going to be here for very long. It helps just kind of gauge, it highlights what you need to take away from that slide in the few seconds that you're there for. Here, as this is playing, this is a bit of a show reel of some example slides that have all incorporated various infographics and visual representations to help assist their presentation. So no matter what the research topic is, they all work to better engage audiences, whether it's an intro slide or a slide early on, a figure, things that accompany your text or while you're talking, while you're explaining. These are all excellent examples, and you can find these online if you Google Mike Morrison's open science framework. So yeah, that's me. I'm going to hand it back over to Tepi unless there was any questions specifically on that what I was talking about?
There's been plenty of questions. Perhaps we'll swap roles and you can monitor the chat, and as new ones come through. One of the things a couple of people have been asking about whether we're going to make the slides available afterwards. We will make the presentation slides and roadmap available for people, including the detailed roadmap. And I think that'll be through the engagement and impact website. Yep, Kanina's
thumbs up from Kanina. Yep.
Great. All right, so I'll try and share mine, Ben.
Yes, let me go back in. I should be better at this by now.
Everybody can have a break. I know it's very fast. I know it's very hot. So we'll give it a few seconds and we can go again. You all right, Ben?
I've just closed Zoom accidentally. So I think I'm still, apologies for this.
One of the things we were talking about before was Canva. And so I would encourage people to have a look at that if you were looking into doing some infographics or maybe some GIFs, which are moving images. They can be great for social media, really engaging, and they're very quick to produce with some of the Canva templates that are online. Here we go.
There we go. Apologies, I hid it away.
All right. Okay, so I'm going to pick it up from pre-publication. So this is when you know that your article's accepted. You've hit that final hurdle, and you've got that short window of time prior to it being available online. I know some journals don't do the online, but most do nowadays. So you've probably got a week, 2 weeks, depending on how, maybe 3 weeks. And this is a key period when you can do some of the cool stuff. So one of them is pitch to local media. And so we've had a couple of examples of working with UON Communications on this. And they've been really great in helping shape a story that can be put together. And that might be something for, say, the local news station, ABC Newcastle, maybe the local newspaper, Newcastle Herald. If it's a bigger story, of course, others, the TV, and wider than New South Wales can also be targeted. I think one of the key things I took away was that the angle of the pitch with media should be how the research fits within current news cycles where possible. So if there's something going on and there's something big going on with COVID-19 at the minute, if there is a way to tie in how the research relates in context to that, then that can really help get the pitch up. And I think the big take home is always persist, because first time in the door, it's unlikely that they'll respond to your email, they'll get back to you. But if you keep trying them, not obviously hampering them, but if you keep trying them, you're probably going to get 1 or 2 in. So yeah, persist. Similar persistence with the conversation. So a few people might have already written for the conversation. The pitching success I've found, at least, is very low. So you really do have to persist. And even one journal article can have multiple different angles on it. I suppose the context for all of this really is that you need to decide whether your journal article does have an important message for beyond academia, and most will have at least something. So there is the idea of, okay, maybe it's a systematic review or it's a larger policy paper. That might be something that's more relevant for the bigger publications in the conversation or national news and things like that. So keep pitching. The pitches take a little bit of time to write, and it might be helped through some assistance from communications experts. So we have an expert at Hunter Medical Research Institute who we work with, and also the team at the University of Newcastle, and they've been really great in helping to shape that. So find somebody, and that might be the university comms people, and try and work with them on shaping a pitch, and choose your most friendly co-authors and most yeah, the most engaged co-authors to write this one with, because it'll be a tough piece. But they really do get large reach and high engagement. If you haven't written for the conversation before, I thought I'd just drop this in here. I'm not going to go to town on it, but this is the questions that they ask for on a pitch. So in one sentence, what will your article say? And this is really the kind of key message, the key story. You don't want to put the whole paper into one line. It's how it fits in context. Then why do your readers need to know about this? So this is the why and the significance. Why is it important? And you've got to remember the conversations readership is a lay readership in general. So they're not going to be experts in your field. So you need to articulate why it's important to them rather than important necessarily to your particular field. And then the final one is, what are the key points and examples to support the argument? And this is where you put in the timeliness points and the news cycle. Is there something that can be tied to it? Is there something around COVID-19? Is there something around a particular season that we're in, or something that's happened in the news that can be tied in? And some additional points. So it's a very quick pitch, really, because it's a maximum of 100 words for the main bit, which is the significance, and the story is only one line. But I do find they're quite tough to write. Imagine trying to get in a whole paper into such a short space. So I'm sure there's plenty more you can do pre-publication, but now we're going to move into what you can do once the paper's out. And this really links back to a lot of the stuff that Ben's already done the formative work for, and can link right through. So Ben said that I was going to talk about Sherpa Romeo. And so this is, we've had a few suggestions about putting papers on ResearchGate as open access. And so this website's a really useful one. If you Google Sherpa Romeo, you'll be able to find it. And the image on the right shows what that website comes back and says. So I just typed in one of the journals we submit to, the Journal of Physical Activity and Health, and it tells me whether I'm allowed to put the published version, an accepted version, which part of the paper am I allowed to put my Word document version up on ResearchGate, or the publisher's version. And you can just check very quickly, and there's some more information if you click those little plus buttons on the website, and it tells you, yes, you can, or no, you can't, according to this journal's rules, put the PDF available online. As far as I'm aware, most you're able to send to personal contacts if requested via email. So you're allowed to send the published version. Similar in ResearchGate, you can upload a copy behind the scenes, and then when somebody requests it, you can just click a button and it sends it to them for you. So we've had a couple of instances of that. The same with archiving essentially everywhere you can. So ResearchGate is one, academia is another option for similar to ResearchGate. Ensuring that Google Scholar links through into open access versions where possible, and also using the university's Neuro system and trying to link in open access versions there as well. I'm sure Kanina knows a little bit more about that one than I, but it's important to make sure we try and get the open access versions available to people. So one of the ones that Ben was talking about earlier was drafting a plain language summary. So Ben talked about what the content was that was in it. You can only, using Kudos, you can only publish your plain language summary once you've got to the post-publication stage. Kudos is just one platform, but we found it really useful, and we'll talk a little bit about why a couple of slides later. But it allows, essentially, you can upload it and it makes it look like a little blog version of a plain language summary available online on a website, and you can share that link to whoever you want. But like I say, we'll talk about that in a little bit more detail here. So this is what the left-hand side is, what you see as an author in the back end. So you can see you put your plain language title, what it's about, why it's important, and you can even add your own personal, unique perspective. So this is a paper about the Global Action Plan for Physical Activity. I put my perspective on it. All of the other co-authors contributed to what it's about and why it's important. We then shared it, and that's the right-hand side. So you'll see you can add a photo, you can make it look nice and glossy, and you can tailor who you send it to with unique links so that you can track who's opened it, who hasn't, and you can really just see how far you're getting engagement-wise with a plain language summary. So if you're sending it to a key policy person and you want to know whether they've opened it or not, you can with Kudos. At the bottom of the right-hand side, you can click through into the publication as well. So it tells you how many people have read the plain language summary and gone, this is great, and then gone through and clicked onto the publication itself. Another one is something that might seem, might seem fairly easy, and it is really informing your internal colleagues. So letting everybody know, we all work in small teams, and then there's a bigger team that we all work in, and then we're all in the university. Choosing the right level, maybe that's your extended research group that you've collaborated with, and just saying, look, we've got we're going to set up this email system that we're going to share all of our papers within, so we all know what each other's doing. It's an opt-in process. So we're just going through this process at Hunter New England now, just so that we know what everybody else in the building's doing, and it can be really good for sparking those collaborations. And we actually took this from a research group that had been doing it at the University of Limerick in Ireland, and it's been working really well for them and sparking some new collaborations. It's a really simple one, but I think a really, really cool one. You can share your plain language summary within here as well, rather than just your paper. So Ben talked about sharing the results with stakeholders, and now you can share your published results with stakeholders. So that might be the paper itself, depending on the stakeholder, but it might also be an infographic or the plain language summary. And this could be an extended version of what you've already sent to your stakeholders. So one of our stakeholders is schools who are involved in our programs. So in the early stages, we give them feedback, and at the end stages, we like to give them feedback as well. What we've submitted to scientific journals, it's also nice to feed that back as well. Perhaps in a slightly different format, but it's still giving them the option there to go and have a look. This is a cool one, especially for those papers that have a bit more global relevance and a little bit larger. So we're interested in physical activity as one of our research areas, and I just came across one day that there was no Wikipedia page for physical activity. It all focused on exercise, which is, if anybody knows me, is a little bit of a pet peeve when people mix up physical activity and exercise. So I just started up a physical activity Wikipedia page. I know others that have also contributed to it as well, which has been great. And we can all work on a working Wikipedia page, and you can embed your most important reviews and definition papers within a Wikipedia page, just to give it, thicken it out a little bit. So depending on what your research area is, this might be an option, it might not. And all it requires is to become a contributor on Wikipedia, which is free, and just takes a little bit of setting up and getting used to the system. But once you've got used to the system, it's not too bad. This is a big one. So traditional academic posters versus new age academic posters. I think there's always two camps with this one. I've put the extreme end on the left-hand side and the other extreme end on the right-hand side. Obviously, there's a spectrum of different poster presentations for conferences. Well, I suppose that extends also to PowerPoint presentations as well. The amount of words, the amount of pictures, the attractiveness. I'd really recommend people to go and have a look at this 20-minute video by Mike Morrison if you're submitting to conferences. It gives some really good detail and even some citations for why it's important to minimize the amount of text on academic posters, to essentially turn them into what looks more like the right-hand side than the left-hand side. There's also in Mike Morrison's profiles on the Open Science Framework, as Ben was talking about earlier, there's some templates. So you can just drop content in. We've been using this is his template version 2.0. We've been using one of his earlier ones, which probably sits somewhere in the middle. Personally, I think the one on the right might be a little bit too sparse. Of course, the one on the left is a little bit too much. Well, it's way too much text. So there's a nice happy medium in the middle as well. And so you can grab all of those templates online via Mike Morrison's Open Science Framework, and also watch the video. Wrapping it all up is share, share, share again, share again, share again. So there's many different ways we can share. In person's not on here. This is not an exhaustive list. Thinking of all the different ways you can share it: Google Scholar, the University Neurosystem, ResearchGate, academia, social media. It can be helpful to have this in the plan that Ben talked about earlier, so that people are responsible for putting it into a plan so that it actually gets done. It's easier said than done, of course. Sometimes time and all of this sort of stuff. But if you have it written down as a plan, yes, we're going to engage with these certain platforms to target these certain people. That can be really useful way of not just going a whole scattergun approach and trying to narrow it down. So as Ben was saying earlier, we've been working on that plan with the various projects. We've been using a system called Grow Kudos, and that's the same system that has been used for the plain language summaries. They have similar to Canva, they have a pro version where you can make plans, but it's easy to do in other programs as well, Word document. We've just been trialing the Kudos Pro version, and we found it quite useful. Okay, monitoring engagement and impact. I've realized that we're coming to the end of time. So it's quite good, really, because we welcome thoughts on how to do this better and in a feasible way. So I'll just give a quick highlight. We've been doing all of these great activities, but we're not great at tracking our engagement and eventually impact. So there are multiple platforms that produce engagement data for us. There's a few down at the bottom. And it's about choosing the right metrics and reporting the right metrics. We found the metrics from Kudos to be great because you can tell who's opening what. And some of the others are a little bit more broad. So this is the Kudos one. On the bottom right, you can see I've just circled and highlighted one particular share that had 21 clicks on it. If you look a little bit down to the 6th of December, you can see that there was no clicks on it. So I can tell that I sent an email to my boss, went, hey, have a quick look at this. And I know that it's not been opened. It's only a little joke, but I'm sure he read it another time. But I can see that particular link wasn't clicked on for this plain language summary. So it's a really great way of tracking which platforms have had good engagement. You can see the Twitter one down at the bottom there, 92. Rather than the particular email to individuals. So I think that's really great, and you can track all of that in Kudos. But there's also the conversation. These are some of my conversation articles. You can see how many reads you've had. You can see all of your previous comments that have been on the paper, and getting used to replying in a diplomatic way to some comments is great. And there's been some really good discussion and follow-up I've had from conversation articles as well. You can use ResearchGate. This can boost the amount of people that might read your articles. You've got an indicator in ResearchGate as well of your research engagement up the top and research interest. There's always more that can be done. This is the final slide. Knowledge translation goes beyond the journal article. So we've only really focused on the journal article process here, but there's many more things that you can do with engaging co-production, and end user engagement is really important. But this is really focused presentation on the journal article. We hope we've provided some useful stuff. The great team at Hunter New England Population Health, I want to say a big thanks to them who've been working on this with us, and on other knowledge translation champions. And finally, Never miss an opportunity to plug your papers. On the right-hand side, this is related to knowledge translation, the effectiveness of technology-enabled knowledge translation. So that would be things like Grow Kudos and ResearchGate and things like that would be in there, and improving the use of research in public health. So that's just a review we've done recently. So we're kind of trying to blend a little bit of research in with this practical approach as well. So I think that's us. Thank you very much. Yeah, if anybody's got any questions, you can fire them away to Ben or I. My email's down at the bottom there. We'll get Ben's emails the same, but without the one. Yeah, any questions?
Thanks for that one, Tepi. There's just two quick ones that you might be able to answer. Do you ever do the conversation during data collection to generate interest? So is my understanding that they need to be published for the conversation to
no so
or?
The conversation, you can actually write an article untied to a journal article, so you can write about anything. My most recent one was about cycling and walking. I've not published a specific article on cycling and walking, but I was able to talk about it in that general news cycle of COVID-19 pop-up cycleways. So it's finding an angle on something that you're knowledgeable about and trying to tie that in with maybe some of your own research, but it might not be your own personal research, might be other people's that you're very familiar with.
That's great, and a great way to generate some interest. And the second question was, what is the difference between ResearchGate and academia?
Not a lot, really. Personal preference is ResearchGate. You can generate DOIs, which I'm sure people are familiar with the normal papers. So it's like a constant link. You can upload anything you like. I find it a little bit quicker. These are all just personal preferences. Of course, I upload to both, just so that anybody clicking online to try and find my open access stuff will find it in Google. But yeah, I find ResearchGate a little bit easier. You can upload your conference presentations, you can upload your conference posters, you can upload your preprints, you can upload your data into ResearchGate. Of course, you've just got to check with all of the various checks that you need to do when you're uploading stuff like that. But yeah, I found it really useful.
Okay, guys. I think thank you very much. That was incredible.
Is it just, sorry, Kanina, I can only just
having trouble hearing you, Kanina.
Okay, how's that?
Much better.
Yeah, probably helps if the microphone is near my mouth. Thank you very much, guys. That was fantastic. I think Casey will agree. We got an awful lot of chat happening there, and I actually have a sneaking suspicion that people will want to hear maybe a bit more from you. And if you guys are up for it, and we kind of keep COVID at bay a bit, we might be able to get you guys back and to dig into some of those and drill down on some of those things if you guys are up for it. Sure. So, as always, it's an absolute pleasure working with you both, and thank you again for your time. And at this stage, Casey, what I will do is if you guys can stop sharing, and I'll start to share my screen. And this is actually the guys' work was a really nice segue into what I'm going to cover today, which sort of links in. So if everyone can see my page, in case I might just get you to just keep a note on chat and yell out if there's anything you'd like me to address while that's going on.
Sure.
For those of you who don't know, I think we'll start my sort of relatively short session at this stage with how to get into the EI toolkit, where everything that Tepi and Ben have just taken us through will be uploaded. If you go to the UON homepage under Research and Innovation, down to Research Impact, you will see a page of our plain English promotions of our impact case studies that my colleague Karina Bates and I put together. And you'll also see a link for the engagement and impact toolkit. As I said before, the toolkit has had about 600 visitors over 12 months, and accessed about 8,000 resources, including obviously, and very soon we will have that publication roadmap up, which was fantastic. And I mean, one of the things that unfortunately I can't do is that, you know, not being a researcher, it's very difficult to give you guys that sort of lived experience. So I really do want to encourage researchers who would like to share their experiences in terms of engaging with end users, you know, knowledge translation, promoting their research, you know, get in contact and let me know, you know, anything that you'd like to share. So as you can see on the EI toolkit, you've got sort of major themes here, and today we're going to be focusing on promoting your research impact. I think it's a good tie-in relation to what Tepi and Ben have just gone through. What I will say in terms of this presentation is that I have focused very much on what individual researchers and research groups have control of. That is where you're not requiring sort of a third party to support you to do this kind of promotion. So I wanted to kind of to frame it that way as much as possible. So if we just go down, this slide is this presentation is actually on the EI toolkit, and obviously you're welcome to check it out at any stage. What we're going to look at this presentation is sort of 3 elements of promoting your research impact, and I'm going to take it from what have we got at the university and how do you hook into those sort of resources. One of the first things that we have obviously is that all university staff, not just researchers, but all university staff have the opportunity to promote their work via a publicly accessible internet profile on the university's website. The vast majority of you will have already done that, but I think it's probably with today's session, I think with the way that things are at the moment, it's probably a really good idea to go back and review that, your profile, with this kind of idea that you do need to be kind of promoting your impact over various other things that are in your profile. Well-considered profile provides multiple benefits for researchers, increased visibility, opportunity to highlight impact beyond academia, which is what the guys were also sort of talking about. It also provides a comprehensive narrative that is ideal for repurposing for LinkedIn profiles, grant applications, awards, and promotional activities. One of the things that I would say is that basically your profile and your university researcher profile should not be considered this kind of adjunct to everything else that you do. In fact, I think it probably should be, you know, a culmination of all the things that you do, and a very, just like anything else, a very smart, well-considered profile just has more benefits. One of the things that I wanted to tell you about today, if you have not done your profile, or you're thinking about going up and updating your profile, there is a video that you can watch, and the link is here on the toolkit, which tells you how to sort of do your profile. But we're going to look at a couple of tabs that are sometimes overlooked, and we certainly don't. We haven't been promoting those in the past, and I think it's probably well worth having a look at them at the moment. Obviously, the biography tab, most of you will be totally aware of this particular page, but
sorry,
again,
Kanina, can I just jump in? If possible, can you put your presentation on presentation mode?
Oh, beg your pardon. Yes, definitely. Sorry,
great.
mate.
That's all right, as long as it works for you. Thanks, that's better. Yep.
Yeah, not at all. So, you know, as Tepi and Ben were suggesting over and over again, when writing or revising your profile biography, use plain English, be succinct, consider your audiences beyond academia. This is a public platform where we have people looking for individuals that have not just specific skills, but have that are able to demonstrate that they actually have achieved what they've set out to do. I think it's probably a good idea sometimes when you're thinking about these things and promoting yourselves is to, if you can, put yourself into the shoes of that end user or that industry person or that council or government individual who is looking for someone who they know can deliver, you know, on the research objectives. Step one, introduce yourself. So one of the things that I see is when I'm reading these biographies is that they tend to be a kind of a chronological essay of people's sort of work or career. So it'll go, you know, I started off and I did this, and then I did a PhD, and then I went to the University of California, and then did it. And really my thing is get to the important stuff quickly. You know yourself as somebody who has to get around websites more often than not. You don't want to wade through page after page looking for the gold. Articulate your impact early and succinctly and in plain English. The other thing that I would say is to use the structure to highlight the impact. Consider the use of subheadings. Often when we look at researcher profiles, and I do sort of encourage you to go and have a look at yours at the moment, if it's just this sort of page of, you know, dense text, it's sort of like a bit overwhelming. And also it doesn't really help you to reuse that narrative to repurpose for a bunch of other things. So if you need to, you know, put in things like research impact, leadership, publications, income, industry partners is one of the things I did want to point out. I think in this world when people might be looking at your profile and they want to know whether you can deliver on things, one of the big sells is that, you know, that you've worked with very significant external partners as well. Now, obviously, you need to be mindful of any sort of commercial sensitivities around that or cultural sensitivities around that. But if you have an opportunity to flog the fact that you work for the World Health Organization or indeed that you did something for a major federal government project, get it in there, I say. Prioritize outcomes over outputs. I think this is very similar to what Tepi and Ben were talking about as well. Of course, your outputs, you know, need to be, you know, excellent and solid. But when it comes to actually letting people know what you're capable of doing and promoting that aspect of what you can do, what did you achieve? So we often, I think in the research community, talk about this is what the research, this is what I was asked to do, and this is the process that I went through, and we just miss all the good stuff. Like, you know, what did that achieve? If you worked on something where you could claim that you were able to improve student literacy in, you know, 12 schools by 15%, put it in there, or better still, you know, put together one of those amazing infographics that the guys were showing us previously. Use keywords strategically. Obviously, that's all about making sure that when people are searching, they're finding the right words. What keywords are more likely to get the attention of stakeholders beyond academia? And I'm not saying that this all needs to be about beyond academia, because you need your academic connections and your collaborations for sure. Will the average punter understand what it is that you can do for them? So it really is thinking about taking, I guess, yourself out of the equation a little bit and thinking about what is it that this end user and in some cases the person that is paying my research, paying for my research, what do they need out of this? Focus on aspects of your research that is topical, related to government priorities, and in a discipline where significant funding has been recently committed. Now, I don't know if there is any spaces that are like that at the moment, nor might there be for quite a while. And that's why I think that it is worth at the moment really taking some time out to have a look at this sort of stuff. Limit repetition. So one of the things that I would not do personally, and as I say, this is a personal choice, you do have tabs on these sites that indicate, you know, that have income and your publications. There's probably no need to kind of mention those again in the biography section. And of course, review regularly. Consider your profile biography as a living document to be reviewed regularly. Unlike your publications and income data, which is updated automatically, your biography does need your attention. Now, this one's interesting. This is the Esteem tab. For those of you who have been around for a while, you'll know that Esteem measures used to be part of our Excellence in Research Australia submission, and it's been taken out of that. And there was a lot of talk that it would go in to the engagement and impact submission in future rounds. Now, we're currently waiting for a review, a full review by the ARC of both the ERA and EI assessments. That is due actually any time this week, and we'll get a better idea of how Esteem measures fit into that. But what I am encouraging you to do is to try and get all of your Esteem measures into this Esteem tab if you can. Now, I think it's fair to say, and I would not be kidding anybody here if I was to say that Nexus is not, you know, is it perfect for our needs today? Probably not, but it is what we have. And if you get the data in there, my end of the world is able to pull that data back out. So I'm sort of saying, if you don't have something that fits sort of nicely into invitations or nicely into prestigious works, don't worry so much about the nuances of that. Get it in there. You can toggle it so it doesn't show anyone else, but at the back end, we can report on, you know, faculty performance in that respect. And we certainly want to know for major submissions of important advisory roles that you guys are doing, industry board membership, independent commissions that you're working on. We don't want these to just go by the by. So try to get them into Esteem measures, or at the very least keep your own Esteem records wherever possible. And look, if you have the money for, if you are able to get the money for certain systems, there's systems that are able to collect that sort of data.
Kanina, I might just pause you there if I could with a couple of questions that have come through.
Surely.
One from Wendy. So review, and let me know if you hopefully can answer these. So reviews of articles are counted, and is it okay to identify these in the profile?
Yeah, I don't see any problem with that at all.
Okay. And the other question I had for you from Grace was, you mentioned possibly using an infographic to promote parts of your work and research on your profile. Are you able to upload images, and do they have specific dimensions? I know that.
Oh, I knew someone would take me quite literally with that case. Yeah. Look, no is the simple question. I suppose I was more sort of thinking, if there is opportunity to do that kind of stuff, definitely do it. And I do not think, unfortunately, between us 50 or so people, that that Nexus is up for that at this point in time. But I guess, yes, thank you for clearing that up. What I should have said is, if you have the opportunity to do that stuff, do it. But if it has to be in the written word, just keep it really, really simple, and as you would in an infographic. I hope that helps.
Thanks, Kanina.
Pleasure. One of the tabs that I actually stumbled across and didn't even know that it was here, but it was actually put in a number of years ago. So it was a bit of, forward thinking. it is the projects tab in Nexus. Now there's actually more than 300 projects in there, believe it or not. This tab is actually a pretty good repository for researchers to link grants, publications, HDR students and collaborators, including external partners, to individual research projects. Now, do not get me wrong, it is it's definitely no grow kudos for sure, but it is there, it is quite simple, and it doesn't take too much skin off your nose to get those reports in there. So I just wanted to make you guys aware of that, and obviously the more that's in there, the more that we could potentially report on. So the project section it does do things like collects engagement and impact indicators related to the project. Researcher exchange with partner organisations is one of them, joint funding with collaborators, and HDR exchange. So it's actually one of the more sophisticated things that we've come up with internally, and it's just sort of poorly used because I think very few people know about it. So jump in there and have a play with that. That could be really good for sort of really less sophisticated projects. Okay, moving on to the next slide. Okay, this one is about, I'm just wary of time, I think we're sort of doing all right. Writing your impact story. Again, the same, really it's the same message. Individuals, faculty, schools, centres and research groups can promote their impact through the development of impact stories. I don't think this is terribly dissimilar to basically what Tepi and Ben were talking about with those plain English summaries for publications. Articulating your impact in plain English is a growing requirement for grant applications, promotional materials, research awards, and obviously government assessments, which is my part of the world. In the toolkit, which I just showed you, if you go to the Writing Your Impact Story tile, in that toolkit, it actually has a bunch of resources on developing your impact narratives and impact studies. I've got a tip here. Don't think of your impact statement, narrative or case study as having a single purpose. And I think that's true of any of this stuff. Get your impact story out via social media, faculty and school websites. Very much what Tepi was saying about the repurposing of your summary. So share it. And I think it's always good to have a couple of, you don't need communication experts to do that, but have a couple of people look it over, and particularly someone who does not know your discipline well, who kind of goes, I know exactly what you're trying to say there. And it is very much about those two things. Why is this important? So, you know, X amount of, let's say for instance, X amount of young people suffer from mental health issues and it's costing Australia, you know, X amount in treating it. That's why we're doing the research. You know, people get that and understand why you're doing it. Media promotion. Now, again, like Tepi and Ben, I do not claim to be an expert in this whatsoever. Obviously, the conversation is something that that researchers are able to do. It was launched in 2011. 60% of the conversation's content is republished via other media, and 40% of academics writing for the conversation receive follow-up from other media and approaches from potential external collaborators, including researchers, industry, and future students. As you saw in Tepi's presentation, he used his own and showed you a snapshot of that and how he was able to record engagements that came about following his articles, which is great, and especially if you don't have these other sort of fancy platforms. The analytics in this is also pretty handy and should be used to support any impact statements that you have. They're free analytics, and we also, from my end of things, I can actually see how researchers at Newcastle are tracking against, you know, other universities and see where our weaknesses and other things are. In 2020, to give you some idea of, I think now, unfortunately, Claire Collins is away at the moment. I would have liked to go over this with her a little bit, but she reached 10 million readers on the conversation in 2020. she's also become one of this country's most recognisable science communicators. And I think that Claire has certainly said in the past that a big part of that, of her profile growing at the rate that it has, is the kind of engagement that she's received from the conversation, which I think says an awful lot. The socials. Now, I'm not going to go into too much detail here at all, and I make no apologies for stealing most of this script from another university around basically just some strategies in terms of using your socials. And while some of us, don't love this idea of socials, I think what you can do, and Tepi and Ben made that quite clear, is that it is your platform to share. One of the things that this information does suggest is to really don't go too broad, focus on where it is that the kind of people you need to reach, where they're hanging out, what time they're tapping in, what sort of information they like to get and how they like to receive it, and just make sure that your energies are being a little bit more strategic. And what I've got there actually is a number of channels and just an overview. And with the Twitter one up the top, you can see that it actually says that, these are the times in which Twitter is most, actively engaged with during the day. So that's definitely something. There's also a suggestion. There are a couple of tools, Buffer and Hootsuite, and I don't know if anyone has used these, but they apparently manage multiple social media accounts centrally as well. So look, a lot of this there is an expectation, I suppose, that individual researchers go out and sort of, do a little bit of learning around this space to large part. So that's the end of my presentation in terms of that promotion side of things. I'm very happy to take feedback on that. And I'll just stop sharing my screen now. But I'm very happy to receive any feedback on promotion, or the things that you do, or where you've received support, and to share it with everybody on the EI toolkit. So unless anyone's got any questions, Case?
There's a couple more just come through. So
yep.
Is this for funded research projects, or I'm not sure which slide this one popped up on, or can you
That's
also, right. Groups of people who publish together be classified as a project?
Oh, that might be for the projects tab, potentially. Yeah. Okay. And sorry, what was the second part of it, Case? Sorry.
So the problem with projects is that whenever you want to revise a project, you have to start from scratch, or that's something else. And we've also got groups of people who publish together. Are they classified as a project?
Well, they certainly could be. I mean, I don't think there's any rules in terms
any parameters around that? Yeah.
No, certainly not in terms of how you self-define or put or sort of put that in your profile either. Yep. I guess you do have to think about, though, to be fair, that project tab. And like I say, it's not. This was done a number of years ago, so it's not optimal. But your big issue is if you were doing that with a group of people, just do each of them then put that same project on their profile, which you kind of would want. The thing with that project tab too is that you can toggle it so it can be public, or you just keep it for your own records. So it doesn't have to be publicised. In fact, most things on Nexus you can toggle to be private or public. I just wanted to get an idea just before we let everybody go, Case, of if people could do a show of hands or something of if they would like to hear from Ben and Tepi with a little bit more digging into those various elements that they heard this morning, just to get an idea of the appetite, if that's possible.
You've got a few thumbs up coming here.
Oh yeah, we've got a few.
If people want to do a thumbs up.
If you would like to hear more, yeah. You're in demand, boys.
Yeah, not letting you get away.
No, we've got them now. And the only other thing that I did want to do as well, Casey, if and I'm sorry if I'm stealing your line, but we also do a Newcastle Impact Network community of practice. It's basically a get together of everybody, and it's sort of like it's just a network and a get together, and we share, very similar to this situation where we share resources with each other and what we're up to and how we're sort of navigating the world of engagement and impact. The next one is on the 29th of September. There is a tile dedicated to it on the EI toolkit, and so please do keep a lookout for that. But yes, I know I'm also available to take any questions at any time regarding anything to do with engagement and impact.
We'll just post the link to register for the next session for the Newcastle Impact Network on the chat.
Thank you,
that's
Casey.
there for everyone now.
Perfect.
So if there's no further questions at this stage, I appreciate that everyone's it's been a really great session, really interactive. Thank you to Tepi, Ben and Kanina for your expert presentations today. I think there's been a lot of gold in there, so a lot of takeaways. And Ben and Tepi, we do hope to hear from you guys again very, very soon.
Sounds good.
Definitely. Thank you very much, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you everyone for joining us today, and we hope you have a wonderful day.